Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Jenna and I'm trying something different today. So I'm really interested in true crime. Without sounding weird, I'm really interested in it. I watch a lot of YouTubers and I thought I'd give it a go myself. However, I feel a little bit uncomfortable doing this, just kind of talking to the camera. So I've taken direct inspiration from a YouTuber called Bailey Sarian, and I will link her wherever I can in the screen, but definitely in the description box below. I will link her channel, as I've taken, like I said, direct inspiration from her. She does her makeup at the same time as talking through a case. So this is what I'm going to try and do. I'm not a makeup artist, but I enjoy makeup, and I'm not a detective, but I'm interested in true crime. So that being said, let's get on with the video. So the case that I'm starting with is a man called John List. So John was born in Bay City, Michigan in the United States in the year 1925 to parents Alma and John List Sr. John List Sr. was a devout Lutheran and a Sunday school teacher. And for those of you that don't know what Lutheran is, it's a religion that branches off of Protestantism. I think I said that right. John List, the son, was to follow in his father's footsteps and also become a devout Lutheran and a Sunday school teacher. He then, at the age of 18, enlisted in the United States Army in 1943. He served as a laboratory technician. There's going to be a lot of words I can't say or don't say properly, and this is the first one: laboratory technician in World War II. John was discharged from the army in 1946, and he actually had quite a few medals under his belt, one being the Good Conduct Medal, and also he had just a really clean, really good record in the army. All sounds quite good so far. John's doing all right. Let's see how it goes. So after this, John enrolled at the University of Michigan, where he earned his bachelor's degree in business administration and then went on to get a master's degree in accounting. So I guess all in all, he was quite an intelligent man. And at the time, in the 40s, not a lot of people, or compared with today, I guess a lot of people go to university nowadays, but in the 40s, it was more of a rare thing. So it kind of goes to prove how intelligent he was if he attended university. In 1950, as the Korean War was escalating, John was recalled to active military service. It was whilst stationed in Fort Eustis in Virginia that he met his future wife, Helen Morris Taylor. Helen was the widow of an infantry officer who was killed in the Korean War. She also had a daughter from this first husband called Brenda, and she was 7 years old. It was said that Helen was a knockout. She was tall, slender, beautiful, and when John first met her, he couldn't take his eyes off of her. Interestingly enough, though, years later, obviously, Brenda, so Helen's daughter from her previous marriage, she went on to say that she believes that her mother, Helen, just settled on John, which is a stark difference from him being head over heels in love with her. Yeah, apparently she just settled for him, which is kind of sad, I guess. In December 1951, the couple moved with Brenda to California. In 1952, they then moved to Detroit, and then they moved shortly after to a place called Kalamazoo in Michigan. Side note, just put a pin in the story for a second. Kalamazoo, that's an actual name of a place, and I think it's great. I think it's really great. I think here in the UK we do have some places that they're funny, you know, there's a few places that have questionable names, but in America it's kind of like they run out of places to call places, and Kalamazoo is just an absolute cool car. I love it. Okay, carry on with the story. So in Kalamazoo, they settled for a bit, and this is when they had their 3 children: Patricia, John Jr. and Frederick. In 1959, this is when it seemed that John and Helen's marriage wasn't going too well. It was widely reported that Helen was actually an alcoholic and would just take out all of her frustrations on the world. Unfortunately, just took it out on John. In 1960, Brenda, remember the first child from Helen's first marriage, she married and moved out of the family home, and the remainder of the family once again moved to Rochester in New York. This move was so that John could move to a company named Xerox, I think that's how you say it. He eventually worked his way up at this company to become Director of Finances. In 1965, John accepted a post of Vice President at a bank in New Jersey. So John moved his family one last time to a place called Breeze Knoll, which was a 19-bedroom Victorian mansion, essentially, in Westfield, New Jersey. John also moved his elderly mother, Alma, into the house. This was because she was old, she was widowed, and now they had room with a massive mansion, so why not? Over the next few years, John would go from job to job, being fired from each one. And it was said that John was he didn't really fit in at these jobs, and he was very shy. So he didn't really make an effort to ask questions, to get to know the job better. So just ended up not being very good at his job. Now this obviously would have caused him a lot of pressure, getting fired from jobs, and he never told his family any of this. So he was being fired, having to find new jobs all of the time, whilst also keeping, like a front onto his family, because he just wouldn't tell them. All the while this was going on, Helen List, the wife, was having quite a few medical problems. She would get symptoms like dizziness, headaches, and she would often fall over and hurt herself. And she'd spend a lot of her time in bed. So this meant that John List had to move into a different bedroom. But apparently this suited Helen quite well, because things weren't as great in their marriage as maybe it seemed. I've actually read a book called The Righteous Carriage, The List Murders in Westfield, and as a direct quote, I'm going to read it because it's just a bit easier. But apparently it says that he, John, had never really replaced Marvin, her ex-husband, in the marriage bed any more than Helen had replaced Alma in John's life. Helen still kept the flag that draped draped his casket and his medals from the Korean War. So she clearly hadn't got over her ex-husband. I guess because he passed away, it's not like he left, so it's harder to get over them. Helen entered hospital a few times, but doctors didn't really know what was wrong with her. They had to keep guessing what was wrong with her, really. They thought it could have been some kind of mental illness that had been brought on through her alcoholism. I guess if you're drinking those kind of amounts of alcohol, something is eventually going to take its toll on you. But obviously with John being the main earner of the house, well, the only earner of the house, this added more stress to his situation, because medical bills don't come cheap, and he was having to pay for Helen's medical bills as well. In 1969, John was selling insurance at the time, and apparently it's something he was terrible at, because again, he's not very good at speaking to people, and being a salesman, you've got to have the gift of the gab, really. You've got to be able to talk to people in order to sell your product. But having said this, he earned enough to scrape by paying his bills and his mortgage. In early 1971 though, John realised that he just wasn't earning enough to pay his bills. It was soon after this that he found out that the foreclosure process had begun on his house, because he was so behind on his mortgage payments. At this point, John realised that it was only a matter of time before people found out, because obviously the house was getting repossessed, or whatever you call it. yeah, the house was going. So he knew it was only a matter of time. So he had to think of a plan to get himself out of this situation. In John's head, he thought he would be seen as a failure and, a man that couldn't provide for his family if all of this came out. So what was John's brilliant plan? Well, on the 9th of November 1971, whilst all three of his children were at school, John walked up to his wife and shot her in the back of the head. Once he was sure that his wife was dead, he made his way up to his mother's room. Now remember, the mother, Alma, lived with John, and she kind of lived, they called it the attic, but it was like the top floor of the house so that she had privacy. So he went to find his mum. John shoots her in the head just above her left eye. So if we fast forward to around noon, 2 out of his 3 children arrive home from school. This was 16-year-old Patricia and 12-year-old Frederick. So after already murdering his wife and his mother, John then proceeds to kill both of his children by shooting them both in the back of the head also. Now this story is obviously, like, the whole thing is awful, but one thing that I found particularly chilling is that after he did this, he got hungry. He got a bit peckish. So he went to the kitchen and he made himself some lunch, and then he sat down and ate this lunch. Like it's a normal day. After John had finished his lunch, he drove to his bank, and he closed both his account and his mother's account. He also emptied out his mother's savings account, so took all of the money from that one. After this, he drove to Westfield High School, where his 15-year-old son, John Jr., was playing a football match, so if you're American, a soccer match. Again, this bit is just, it makes the story more chilling, but John then proceeded to watch his son, John Jr., play in this football match. Just watched him like a normal dad watches his son play football. John then just drove them both back home, again like normal, like he usually would. So his son obviously didn't expect anything, but as he walked through the door to his family home, John shot John Jr., his 15-year-old son, in the chest and in the face. Later on, when questioned about the events, John said that the reason that John Jr. had so many shot wounds was because he was trying to fight back, he was resisting, so John had to shoot him multiple times before he stopped. So even though John had just committed some awful, awful crime, he still considered himself a deeply religious man. Because of this, John decided to write a 5-page letter to his pastor. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong, pastor, whatever. He wrote a 5-page letter, which was basically a confession about what he just did. He didn't mail this letter or anything. It was later found on his desk in his study. In this letter, he explained how he was trying to save his family's souls because the 1970s had become a very sinful time and his family were giving in to temptation, especially his daughter Patricia, who wanted to be an actress, and this to John was a very corrupt profession and was also linked to Satan. So after writing this letter, John decided that it was time to move his family's bodies. So he placed them either in or on sleeping bags. I've seen sources say in and sources say on, but I'm gonna go with in. I don't know. I just am. So John moved his family into the ballroom, which I believe is the room right in front of the front door. Now he decided to not bring his mother down from the attic and just left her up there. I'm guessing it's either he didn't want to or couldn't move her, because there must be like quite a few flights of stairs in that place. So yeah, maybe he couldn't move her down, so he just left her up there, which is sad because I guess the rest of the family were all in one place, and she was just left up there by herself. But there we go. It's bad enough that he shot his mother, but you know what I mean. Now this all took place in the evening at night time, and it would all take a long time to do and to sort out. So at some point during this night, John actually went to sleep. Yeah, sweet dreams. In the morning, John decided that he needed to take a few steps to cover his tracks and make sure that he wasn't caught. So John turned down the heat in the house. I guess it's to preserve the bodies and to make sure that there was no smell. So, in case someone came and knocked at the door or anything, that they wouldn't be able to smell the bodies through the door. However, people coming to the door would now be less likely because John had stopped everything that would come to the house, so mail, newspapers, their milk delivery. He stopped it all so that there'd be nobody coming to the house. John called and wrote letters to his children's school to inform them that the family are taking a break and going to visit Helen's mum in North Carolina so that the children wouldn't be attending school for several weeks. John also had the idea, which is quite a clever idea, I hate to say it, but it actually is. He decided to take himself out of every photo in the house. So every family portrait, every photo together or on his own, any photo in the house, he cut himself out of all of these photos. His thinking behind this was that when the bodies were finally discovered and the murders were discovered, that when police would need to find a photograph for like wanted posters for a profile, that there'd be no photos in the house and no reference of what John looked like for the police to try and find him. John then turned all of the lights on in the house. God, it's going in my hair. Yeah, he turned all the lights on in the house and turned the radio on and then just vanished, completely vanished. Now, something that really worked to John's advantage was that the family, they kept to themselves. They didn't socialise much. They didn't have many friends. They didn't talk to neighbours at all. Couple this with nothing coming to the house, like no mail and stuff, would mean that it would take nearly a month for police to be notified and for the murders to be discovered. It was actually the neighbours who noticed that something wasn't quite right, and it was them that notified the police. So they noticed that things were just, there was something strange going on at the house. So it started with no lights were on. They were on all the time, so night and day lights were on, which, is odd. They also thought that it was strange that there was no movement in the house. So, when, again, this is going to sound weird, but we all know what I'm on about. When you look at a house, not that you're staring at a house, but you just notice movement. You see shadows, like people going past the windows. You just know that someone's living there. And there was none of that. The neighbours never saw the family come and go. So arriving home from school or going to work and school, they never saw any of that, so they thought that was strange. The last thing that they saw that was odd, I guess, is although the lights were all on in the house, eventually they would all start to go out with so they'd obviously burn out. So all of the lights in the house would go out one by one. So they'd start with like upstairs, downstairs, whatever. All the lights went out in the house until eventually the house was in complete darkness. I just realised my light is kind of disappearing on me, but hey ho, we carry on. So this was kind of like the last straw for the neighbours. They thought there's too many weird things going on, so they decided to call the police. Now, I've seen a few different, well, two different different stories about the next bit. I've heard that the neighbours called the police. The police agreed with them that, you know, something strange was going on, so they decided to come over, and that they knocked at the door. There was no answer, and then they peered through the windows in the doors and saw that the family were laid there. But the other version I've seen is that police arrived at the house in order to check it, and when they were there, when they got there, there was a man at the property, and he was claiming to be Patricia's drama coach, and he was saying to them, something's not right. I know that you can get in through the back door into the basement, I think it was, and he said, please go in there and see if they're okay. And then that's when they found them, when they had gone in through the basement door or window. I don't know which way it is, but either way, police got there. They arrived, they found the bodies of Helen and her 3 children. They eventually did find the body also of Alma, the mother, in the attic, but of course, because she wasn't with the rest of them, they just took a little while to find Alma, unfortunately. Police launched an investigation and a nationwide manhunt for John, but unfortunately they were at a bit of a loss. They had some leads, well, quite a few leads actually, but they all came to nothing. And of course, it was a lot harder for them because John had, you know, removed himself from all the photographs, so no one really knew what he looked like currently. On top of this, John had a really long head start. He had nearly a month to get ahead of the police because the bodies took so long to be discovered. That's a big head start. You could literally be anywhere with a month's head start. So that obviously made it a lot more difficult for police. Police found the family car at the JFK airport in New York, although there was no evidence to suggest that he had boarded a plane at all, boarded a flight. So they kind of just decided that he had put the car there to divert police, and, you know, it worked. Unfortunately, after their investigation, and they did a proper investigation, it's not like they half-heartedly did this, they launched a whole investigation, but nothing ever came of the whole investigation, and police wouldn't actually find out what happened until 18 years later. According to John and reports, this is what happened in 1971. I've done the typical thing. I didn't record. I paused the video to go for a wee, and I didn't press play again. Don't even know where I got to. I'm just going to start again, and I'll have to edit the video and just cut in where I can. So after John left his car at the airport, he then got a train and a bus from New Jersey to Michigan and then to Colorado. It was in Denver. Do you know what? I can't do browse and breathe at the same time, so I'll be right back. So it was in Denver that John settled, I guess, in 1972, and he took an accounting job under the name of Robert Peter Clark, Bob for short. It was said that this was the name he used because it was a friend from college, or university as we call it in the UK. But after interviewing the actual Robert Clark, he said he didn't even know John, so I don't know why he said that he was a friend. Maybe he didn't have a lot of friends, I don't know. Remembering that John was, you know, a highly religious man, he joined another Lutheran congregation. I think you call it a congregation, sorry if not. So he joined another one, and this is where he would meet Dolores Miller. They actually went on to marry in 1985, which is quite shocking that he, you know, remarried after what he did to his family, but there we go. In 1988, the couple moved to Midlothian, I think it's called, but Virginia, where John took up another accounting job. John's downfall, though, would come in May of, oh no, it's going all over my face. In May of 1989, when a popular American show called America's Most Wanted would air an episode that actually featured the List family murders. For those of you from the UK, like me, the only program I can kind of compare it to would be Crime Watch, but I don't think it's really the same. Um, but it is the same in the fact that they have like a hotline that people can call and give tips to the police. So in this episode, they got a forensic sculptor to make a bust, so like this part of you, to make one of those to kind of show what John would look like at the time of the show airing 18 years later after 1971. Little side note on this, at the time, um, when this show aired, this episode was actually the longest like running case because it was 18 years old. It was the longest one they did, and a lot of people kind of thought nothing's going to come of it, but it's good TV, I guess. That's about it. Now the sculptor that they used, it was a man called Frank Bender, and he was supposed to be like the best of the best at sculpting and forensic art in order to show what aging fugitives would look like. And he actually caught, or helped police catch, quite a lot of these criminals that hadn't been found yet. Something that I found really interesting was one of his methods, Frank's methods, was to go to a forensic, what's he called? Hang on. A forensic psychologist to kind of get like a profile on John. Oh, this is difficult. Okay, be right back, doing mascara. So anyway, now that's done. Yeah, Frank, one of the things he would do is he went to a forensic psychologist to try and get more of like a profile on John and what he would be like now. And yeah, interestingly, the forensic psychologist said that he would be wearing glasses to appear more important and intelligent than he actually was. So the show aired, and luckily, like so luckily, a couple were watching and they looked at it and thought, that really looks like our neighbour. They called the hotline number and, you know, called them up and said, hey, this looks like our neighbour John. No, Bob. So they called up the hotline, said, hey, this looks like our neighbour Bob, check him out. The tip paid off and the police were able to locate John. Now, remember what I said about the glasses? If I can insert a picture on the screen of what the sculpture looks like and what John looked like when he was arrested, it's crazy. It looks so similar, but they're wearing the exact same glasses that John had put on the sculpture. From what the forensic scientist said, that he'd be wearing these glasses to make himself seem more important. He was wearing like the exact same glasses. I really hope I can put it on the screen somewhere because it's really cool. When John was arrested on the 1st of June 1989, for like a solid month, he swore that the police had the wrong people. He was Bob Clark. I don't know who this John List guy is. And yeah, he just said, you got the wrong man. This, of course, changed after all of the evidence was gathered, so all the crime scene evidence, fingerprints, all his DNA. You know, the man lived at the house, so there was a ton of his DNA that they could cross-reference with like his fingerprints from when he was in the army. You know, he was on record, so they cross-referenced it and they were like, come on man, we know you're John List. So eventually on the 16th of February 1990, John had no other choice. He admitted his true identity. He said that in 1971 he was having financial difficulties, bless his little heart, and he decided to start taking money from his mother's bank account in order to pay for his mortgage payments. He also said that during this time, his wife's alcohol problem, and I'm going to read this because it's a quote, his wife's alcohol problem had turned her from an attractive young woman to an unkempt, paranoid shut-in. Lovely. And she would regularly publicly humiliate him by saying that he was inadequate in the bedroom compared to her first husband. He said that all of this was, you know, a lot to deal with, and eventually he went on to say that he killed his family to spare them the humiliation of losing their home, and he really hoped that they would go to heaven. Psychiatrists say that John never showed any remorse or any emotion at all, really, for what he did. He was also diagnosed with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, so, and kind of explained that in his mind, he only really had two options for his little situation that he was in. So in his mind, this is his mind, he could either accept that he's fallen on hard times, accept help in the form of welfare or benefits as we call them in the UK, so accept help, um, or on the other hand, option two, option B, was to kill his whole family. He felt that option one just wasn't really an option, to accept help and to admit that he's a failure and that he's failed his whole family and can't provide for them, blah blah blah. That was just a big no-no for John. So obviously he went for option two. So finally, after nearly 19 years, John was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. At his sentencing, he denied direct responsibility and said, another quote, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened." John was given 5 life sentences to be served back to back. What do you call it? Consecutively. To be served consecutively, which was actually the maximum penalty at that time. If we fast forward to 2002, John did an interview with an American TV host lady, and she asked him why that he didn't commit suicide, like a lot of other cases. So a lot of white men, they tend to, when they do this kind of like kill the whole family thing, they tend to commit suicide at the end, but John didn't do that. And his answer was he didn't want to take his own life because that would prevent him from going to heaven. And heaven is where he would like to eventually be reunited with his family. But it's like, well, isn't murder like a really big sin? And if you sin, you don't go to heaven. I think you're not really going to heaven, are you, John? Didn't think it through. John died on the 21st of March 2008. He was 82 and he died through complications from pneumonia. And he obviously died in prison. The house that it took place in is no longer there. Someone tried to burn it down just 10 months after the murders were committed there. So in 1972, someone tried to burn it down. And there's now another house built on top of it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or if they even know that it happened, but there we go. That puts an end to the horrific chapter. Build a new house on top of it. Let's move on. So that's the story of John List. I hope you enjoyed it. It was more difficult putting my makeup on and talking at the same time. I think I don't really know how Bailey Sarian does it. This is really difficult. Let me know if there's any other cases you want me to cover. That's about it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to this channel and press the like button. Thank you.